And we are live here today. It is the 16th of February in year of our Lord 2024. Rush the Field presented by the Tegan Randolph Show. How is everyone doing? I hope everyone is doing well today as it is a fantastic Friday. Um might notice a little bit of a change. Um, it's right here. I made a grave mistake this wonderful week and decided to shave my mustache and regret it absolutely instantly. But I digress. We are here to talk about facial hair decisions that I do regret. Facial hair grows back, but we do have a lot to talk about today, ranging from the Super Bowl, everything surrounding that, even all the way down to Usher and that performance, as well as some win totals have been released for each college football conference. And I want to kind of dive into each one of those, kind of give some pre predictions on that, dive into some of the schedules and some of the reasoning behind it as well. I do want to give my quarterback rankings as I feel as we head into March. I want to have a solidified ranking of quarterbacks for the NFL draft before we get to the combine. I don't want the combine to be something that inherently changes my opinion whatsoever. It could tweak things, it could confirm some of the things I've seen on film, but I don't want to get baited. I'm very not new to doing NFL draft process type of things, diving into prospects. I think this is now my fourth year doing this on the side. Obviously, do not get paid to do this. But with that being said, I have noticed a trend that I get a little bit swept up into the combine. Same thing with the Senior Bowl. I haven't taken the Senior Bowl severely into effect when we're talking about my rankings outside of guys like Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback, who kind of shows things that you didn't see before. But we could dive into that. I do want to start this show off a little bit on a monologue before we dive into the Super Bowl because I'm going to go down that rabbit hole for God knows how long. And I have a story in the drafts or a video in the TikTok drafts that I don't know if I want to post, not because I think it's funny, but not because of any other reason outside of the fact that it's me being a hater. It's just me objectively. Well, I've been pretty bad today on being a hater in general, partially because there was a video that popped up. Have you seen this? Have you heard about this? Shout out to Motown Noah. Um, God, that I was listening to this show, and if you have not listened to the Coping Hour, it's a great listen. Um, I'm sitting on the treadmill, and his go to saying is, "Have you heard this? Have you seen this? Have you heard about this?" Um, and so to kind of pivot off of that, I do not think before we dive into football, NBA League Pass is appreciated as much as it needs to be. Does it cost too much? Is it a pain? Is there technical issues? Does it need to get revamped? Yes, 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 this, that, and the third. I get it, but the charm of knowing what local teams are doing or the events in between, and I think partially because I worked at one of those like situations where you had to like bring fans involved and you get those contests and that whole thing of handing a fan a mic and kind of taking a trust fall that you know what they're like you don't know what they're gonna say. I mean, I remember times when we had frat guys that were inebriated and we handed a mic and it was very much a we're putting the ball in your court and you literally could say anything. Because it's live. It's happening in real time. And I think because I worked in a job like that, finding those people, I appreciate League Pass so much more because you don't really get it at the NFL level. Yeah, you have, or like even at the college level, you have the games, but you don't really ever get to see that outside of some like fan cam or something. Like you're at the game or you see it on Twitter. And on the NBA, you kind of get streamed it and you get these gems like I think a good example of it is like the Timberwolves old puffed up mascot quite literally eating a cheerleader. Like you don't get those gems with football as much. Um, and I say all this to get to the point of on my For You page, there was an elementary school, and this is I listen, I know I'm in the wrong. I know it's not that funny to make fun of an elementary school band, but listen, man, I played an instrument a lot of my life, very young age, and it was I it was for the national anthem. I don't know what team it was. Point being, it was rough. The whole time I'm sitting there at the gym scrolling, about to finish my workout, and you know the clip of the NBA players where I think it was Iggy Azalea that did the national anthem. And I apologize if Iggy just got a strain and it was someone else. And you're just kind of holding back the laughter. I broke. And I'm sitting there finishing up this workout, and this lady just looked at me like I'm crazy because not only am I just sitting there laughing hysterically, I'm also laughing at an elementary band who is just butchering the national anthem. Just egregious. And I don't really know how to finish the story outside the fact that I think NBA League Pass, NFL Red Zone, don't ever mess with that stuff because you just get these gems. Even Scott Hansen talking through and continuing his broadcast through a fire drill. You're not going to get that anywhere else. You're not going to get that in any other kind of like live television event and watch some reality TV. Like I get it. It's reality TV, but like with the real people that are getting paid millions of dollars. Which I'm sure a lot of guys do not want to admit that, but it's the truth. Yeah, so I'm a pivot off of that because I started the show off talking about how I was hating on an elementary school band and talking about NBA League Pass, and we're talking this is a football show, primarily football, but I needed to get that take off. It's probably not going to get clipped, but I needed to get that take off. Also, the beverage for today, we got the Fantasy Vibe Celsius. No free promo. You get one free promo, Celsius. This is the best flavor. You have to now pay me to ever bring up your brand because I will duct tape this thing until you pay me. Or if another energy drink company pays me, I don't care if it's even bad. It's just these things are getting too expensive. And my caffeine addiction isn't something that I'm willing to give up. I'm not giving this up. It's either you pay me and you send me some big old packages of like a 24 pack, which I did buy once off the TikTok shop. That thing works. And I hate that I'm so susceptible to marketing. Let's get into the Super Bowl. Talking about marketing too. Well, before we get into the game, I talked about it like 2 shows ago that the NFL like Super Bowl ads are not good anymore. And that's not a hot take to anyone. I think that's honestly pretty common, a little lukewarm. Yeah, they weren't good this year. Outside of the one that made me laugh, and like my other friends that were sitting there watching laugh was the one, and I think everyone has said this, the NFL players acting like birds for like their franchise, like Seahawks, Ravens, Eagles. Great stuff. Then there's just like you get like I guess like they try to build up these events and it really just feels like they're just throwing celebrities at a wall and seeing what sticks. And all Super Bowl commercials have really turned into is, "Oh, hey, that's Matt Damon. Oh, that's Jennifer Aniston. Oh, that's that one guy or girl from that show." instead of like maybe it's just my Gen Z self that just is so numb to celebrities and everyone has a status that like it's kind of watered down to a point that I just don't really care. I want to be like with the Super Bowl commercial, I want to like it's gone from I think 4 years ago. It used to be you couldn't tell what the product was like 90 seconds into a commercial, and nowadays you you know what the commercial is 30 seconds in, but it's just a bunch of celebrities talking about it. I will say, I believe it was the one with Ben Affleck was a good Dunkin', like the Dunkin' Donuts commercial. I think was a solid commercial. I can't be mad about that one. But they're just and there's even reports saying they were going to play it safe, and I think they did. But there wasn't even like there wasn't even like a cute one. There was thank God it wasn't like I think I vividly remember the it was the Patriots versus the Rams. That Super Bowl had some of the most like I was depressed, not just because the game was bad, but I was depressed because the commercials was just continuing that. And also, remember when Doritos used to have good commercials? Remember when Mountain Dew used to come out like they would come out swinging, and I would rather them do that than just lay it in. And even I think this is one of the biggest disappointments as a Breaking Bad fan. Popcorners last year, you had a great opportunity. You did a great job with the ad. Problem is, and this is the issue with everything, Super Bowl commercials are just commercial reveals. What do I mean by that? They show them before the game and they keep them going after the game because they spend so much money into it. I'm fine with the after effect, but you're showing it before. These are supposed to be revealed during the game. Also, what's the deal? I'm gonna sound like a 80s comedic. What's the deal with showing a trailer for 30 seconds and then saying, hey, you got to go find it on this website? Show the damn trailer. And why is Timu getting 10 ads? God damn it. What, like, it wasn't that catchy. I think they just hear a jingle and think it's catchy. It wasn't that good. Timu did not have a good commercial, and I was tired of it every single time. And it's not as bad as that plug in the wall one, but I digress because I'll sit here venting as a marketing major. I'll keep venting about advertisements for 20 minutes, and I want to do that. Usher was pretty good. I don't know why Usher was getting a lot of hate. I get it. People wanted to see Justin Bieber. If Bieber wasn't fully invested in that, then he wasn't invested. And I think that's part of the issue is people hear the rumblings instead of just go into it with no expectations, which is what I did because Usher was not my time. Like, I'll be honest, Usher was before my time, just slightly. I appreciate him because, I mean, even if he was like, his prime was a little bit before I could appreciate it. But then, like, a lot of his music is like something I hear at bars all the time. Like, I graduated college not too long ago, and Usher was on a lot. And I knew the songs that were going to come up, and I think he did a great job. It was entertaining, and I wasn't like falling asleep at the wheel. We've had like I think Apple Music. There's one thing I gotta say though, not to sound like a cranky man yelling at the sky. Can we chill out on the reminders of who is going to be at the halftime? I think by the sixth time, Apple Music did like the little like wave name reveal. It's like 10 seconds that just like drags on. I don't need the reminder every time. I know who's going to be on the halftime show. You could do it a couple times throughout. Like, I get it, but it was like I think they may have gotten to like 6 times. And I was done, man. I was like, dude, I get it. Usher's going to be at halftime. Cool. Fantastic work. Also, Beyonce dropping music mid-half or mid-Super Bowl, power move. Damn power move, for God's sake. Anything else? Gronk's kick was lame again. Like, I'm sorry. This bit that FanDuel's got going on, switch it up, do something a little bit better. It never meets the expectations that people want it to be. And I don't really know what do people want it to be, but it's just not great. Like, I don't think it's that great of a bit, and it gets kind of old. But let's pivot. We're talking about everything. I could sit here and talk about the food that was made and all that, but I went with sliders. I am going to talk about food. Made sliders, made some homemade wings, made some homemade fries. Didn't have a lot of people over. I try to limit my Super Bowl party invite list to around 5 people. Don't want to try to pass that because then you're breaching on too many people or talking during the game. You want enough of people that can provide some commentary on what's going on in the game, and but not too many where they're talking through commercials and you can't really soak it all in. And I've already been told by peers that I take the Super Bowl too seriously. I don't care. I'm going to enjoy it the way that I want to. There's plenty of Super Bowl parties in the world. Go find one that fits your needs. I'm going to make sure that it fits my needs and if it fits other people's needs. Like, I'm not going to be strict about it, but like, I'm not going to tell people to shut up during a commercial, but just like, it's a part of the experience. Let me soak in the marketing and see if it works. Let me soak it in. Pause. 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 Let's talk about the game. Patrick Mahomes is my GOAT. I'm not going to try to make a clip here. I've made a bunch of clips. You could go find them on TikTok. I just think when I look back at how I rank players in this sport and really other sports, I want to show consistency. I don't want to be a guy that picks and chooses to fit his narrative. I try to be consistent, and it emphasis on try. It's not easy because it's very much opinionated, but you want to be able to back up your opinions with consistent reasoning. I have guys like Cam Newton as the greatest quarterback and arguably greatest player ever in college sports. I have Michael Jordan as my GOAT, and I have Patrick Mahomes as my GOAT. I by every stretch of the imagination, Tom Brady has every argument, and I'm never going to argue against it. But I do want a seat at the table, and I think my reasoning for having Mahomes in the position that he is a valid enough reason that no quarterback has ever seen a stretch like this in their career, let alone at the age that he is doing it at, and he's not done. So if you think I'm just early to the table, I don't value longevity as heavy as I guess a generic fan would. And if you value longevity, that is fine. I'm just asking people that have like Michael Jordan as their GOAT and then have Tom Brady as their GOAT, I feel like is a contradiction because the same reasoning that you have Jordan as your GOAT, you should probably have Mahomes. Or if you have Tom Brady as your greatest player of all time in NFL history, you should probably have LeBron. But I don't want to sit here and get into a LeBron Jordan debate because we'd be sitting here for a long, long time. And that I feel like that debate has almost just become boring. I'll say it. I think honestly, I don't try to push back on either side for that. I'd be down to have that conversation, which, by the way, that does bring me to one quick point before I dive into the game specifically, because I want to talk about the Mahomes GOAT thing because I've talked about it plenty on my other channels of communication. I will say this though, we will have an email. Rush the Field will have an email. It will be in the description for anybody that wants to submit a question. Let me actually rephrase. Rush the Field has a question. I butchered that one. I'm trying to get this into a clip because I want people to submit questions. I want people to submit questions to the show so I can react to them. The way that you can submit to them is through this email. Email will be in the description. It will be on your screen. You could send in questions about basically anything. It doesn't just have to be football related. I'm not saying that I'm going to give the best advice. If you ask for personal advice, if you feel comfortable doing that, feel free to do so. But don't expect the most serious answer in the world. But if you have any type of topic you want to talk about, it's free of charge. Just send an email asking whatever question you want. I took inspiration from Motown Noah on this one. I liked that way for you guys to have the opportunity to ask questions. It could be basically anything you want it to be. Does not have to be football related. And the goal is for the last 15 minutes of this show, I pick some of my favorites and we dive into it. Just keeps it interesting, keeps me on my toes, and it's just not so football focused. Although feel free to ask questions when we're talking about football. It is an open door. So I will plug it. It's going to be on the screen in the next following episode, but wanted to get that ball rolling. So feel free, send any question you'd like. And we're going to go ahead and dive into the actual Super Bowl. All right. The great Super Bowl. all those people who sit there and tried to tell me that this Super Bowl matchup sucked. And honestly, each side winning, like if the Niners won or if the Chiefs won, you were going to hate it. But was the matchup not great? Did it not produce a great product? I mean, God forbid we ended up getting a Seahawks Broncos type of a matchup where it was dead after the first snap. And we have been blessed with some great Super Bowls in the past couple of years. Rams Bengals was really entertaining. Even last year, if you just love high scoring affairs, some great plays in that one. I think the ending just like left a really bad taste in people's mouths, even though it was a good call. And then this one had a great ending. It had everything you asked for. I had no stakes in it outside of a parlay. And I was standing up pacing in my room just because I love this sport and you get so invested in what's going on, and it was that close. And not everything has to be offensive for it to be this elite level game, and that game proved it. I mean, both sides making critical mistakes. You had trick plays, you had overtime, you had clutch drives down the field, a game winner, just play after play after play. And the aftermath and the stories you are hearing from the 49ers camp is insane. And I'll dive into that in a minute, but this game is everything you could have asked for when we're talking about a Super Bowl. Not to mention solid halftime show, like I said. You could wish the commercials were better, but I think when we look back 5 years from now, I think it's going to suck because in the next 5 years there's going to be a bad Super Bowl. I would just say appreciate what we just witnessed. We're about to head into the offseason, and I just know once the NFL draft happens and once free agency is over and the dead period starts, is why that feeling of missing football is why I try to soak in the Super Bowl as much as possible and appreciate a great game, regardless of what the matchup is, because that feeling of not having football on your screen every weekend really sucks. But let's talk about what the 49ers camp has been like. The 49ers camp, you're getting some weird things coming out. This is a team that's still primed to go back to the Super Bowl. I think by every means, as long as you have Brock Purdy on that contract, you're going to be able to pay 90% of that roster. I'm sure there's going to be guys that they leave. Dre Greenlaw tearing his Achilles the way that he did at the time that he did was heartbreaking. You have the guy that said he was hungover, which allowed for Chris Jones to get that pressure on Brock Purdy in a critical moment. You now have teams across the league kind of victory lapping with the Chiefs, which is something that I did not expect. Fletcher Cox goes on to really rip into Deebo Samuel, which, by the way, Trent McDuffie had that boy in a box. And you're kind of sitting there thinking, I mean, just from a storybook aspect, it's so tough to imagine that they can mentally get themselves right for another run, especially if they had to face like a Mahomes again. And it's so fascinating to watch a team that I believe I saw a stat that they were favored in every single game that they played this season. Every single one. And sometimes in sports, that does not matter. It could get you to the Super Bowl. You could have a super talented team. But if you don't have the best player on the field, it does not matter. And that's what happened in the Super Bowl. And what can you do moving forward outside? I think a lot of people think that they have to rebuild. Like, clearly, if this is not going to work, like, what else could they have done? I'm sorry, you're not going to have a roster like that and have a quarterback be the 10 times better than Brock Purdy. Like, A, you're not going to be able to upgrade that. B, if you want to upgrade at quarterback, you're sacrificing the rest of the roster. That's just how the NFL works. You can't have your cake and eat it too. That's why I say just run it back until it goes into the ground. Like, I'm sorry, you took the chance with Trey Lance, and that was your ticket to have this plus athlete, this game-changing quarterback with a live arm and mobility. And in reality, you got Brock Purdy, which is not a bad thing. Brock Purdy objectively didn't play bad, didn't play great. He played mediocre. And it got you really, really close to the finish line. But sometimes that the small differences in quarterback play and situational football is what makes the difference, especially in a Super Bowl. And Patrick Mahomes got the job done. That does not mean you blow up what you have built as this organization has. It does not mean Shanahan's a fraud and you should fire him. God forbid he takes you to 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. But then you do wonder, what can you change? And it's a terrible, terrible feeling. Brandon Ayuk is now talking about wanting to leave, or you're having cryptic Instagram posts. Like, just very weird things are coming from that camp. So I sit back and you wonder, what can the 49ers do to get better? And it's really an open question if anyone has any opinions on it, but run it back until you really have to make some adjustments with this roster. And I don't think that's now because of their window. I don't think their window is closed, but it's definitely not trending to having another 3 years of this. I think next year is probably when you have to make some really tough decisions. But with how their contracts are set up, you have the window right now. And on the flip side, Kansas City Chiefs are going to look very different next year, but it's not going to matter because they have 1-5 in the picture. You pay Chris Jones. I don't care. You got to pay the guy. There's some rumblings that people are trying to get creative, that you trade the guy for assets and you draft his replacement. You're not going to replace Chris Jones in a draft. You know what? Maybe they can, because they traded Tyreek Hill and went back-to-back. But I think Chris Jones' value and the way that team is structured is around his play. We saw it for the weeks that he wasn't playing, and then when he comes in, it was a big deal. I think you can lose Snead. As much as I love L'Jarius Snead, if we're picking and choosing who you got to pay, and I think the fact that Mahomes is restructuring his contract is incredible. I mean, the dude is really chasing Brady. I mean, in my eyes, I think he's already passed him, but that's just under my circumstances. And I think in his eyes, he still has a long road to go. You got to upgrade at wide receiver somehow. But I think this team, it gets really interesting because it's starting to look like Travis Kelce is going to say, I made the prediction that he was going to retire after this year. And it's looking like he most likely will stay. But I do have concerns. I don't know if they three-peat. It's a safe bet. If you want to put $20 down that they three-peat, Mahomes breaks records. So it wouldn't shock me if they three-peated. But I think where they pivot with the age of Andy Reid, there's rumblings that he wants to retire. Travis Kelce's most likely going to retire. You have to make moves with Chris Jones. You have to make moves with L'Jarius Sneed. You have to upgrade the wide receiver core. All that being said, as long as you have 1-5 at the quarterback, I struggle to be anxious for the Kansas City Chiefs moving forward. Congratulations to them. They did a fantastic job. And I'm very curious within the next 365 days what these two teams will look like after another season, another playoff run, because these are two teams that you kind of feel the expiration date is getting there. More with the Niners, less with the Chiefs, because Mahomes is going to be there. But then again, the surrounding pieces, I'm very curious on if this is one of their weaker supporting casts. I understand they got through Lamar. They got through Tua. They got through Josh Allen. They got through Brock Purdy, which, by the way, that doesn't mean like they got through just those quarterbacks. They got through those teams as well. And those situations and going on the road with that worst supporting cast. But I also got to make it very clear that I doubt Mahomes wants to live on that tightrope for the rest of his career. The situation has to get better. And I think the Chiefs know that, and they're going to make moves for it. But that was Super Bowl. We are into the dreaded, scary off season. I am excited and kind of sad. I'll be honest, I'm sad. It's all right to be sad because it's the off season. But then again, we have a lot to look forward to. Win totals are coming out, and let's pivot to college football. And I specifically want to talk about the SEC, the best conference in college football. Win totals have dropped. And we got a lot to talk about. We have one schedule I really want to highlight. Really want to highlight this one schedule. But we'll talk about that when we get to their win total because it's egregious. And I'm going to share my screen just because I want y'all to be able to see what I'm talking about. We're going to adjust some things. Damn, okay. All right. College football odds list. Let's get the ads out of my way. Can I, I'm pausing that. It's fine. SEC, Georgia Bulldogs, 10.5 win total. Now, we're not going to dive into everyone's schedule. A lot of this is going to be gut feeling picks. I would say it's pretty safe to say Georgia hits this. I would lean towards the over. It's Georgia. I think there's a lot to like with this team. I think Carson Beck has almost become underrated at this point. Georgia's going to be obviously in the title contention. They bring in another draft class that's really good. Obviously, they're losing Bowers, but I think this defense and the staff that they have brought in is going to come back into the forefront. Obviously, it took a step back in 2023. They made the SEC title. Obviously, they lose to Jalen Milroe in Alabama. I see no reason for Georgia not to be back in Atlanta fighting for an SEC title. And to do so, I think they pretty comfortably would get to 11 wins. Even then, with how stacked the SEC is, if they hook this at 10, I still think they would make it in. But as a team that I think is just set in stone, going to make it into the SEC title, Georgia 10.5. I would feel really comfortable with an over right here. Now for Texas. Texas is really interesting. Texas, I find fascinating enough that I would pull up their schedule in 2024. So, orange and white game, obviously. Let's stop seeing this. I don't care at this point. They play Colorado State, which, if you remember, Colorado State was the team that pushed Colorado around. Feisty group of guys. They're going to get boat raced. So, we're looking at 10.5 wins, 11-win season for the Texas Longhorns, which would be massive because we're talking about a team bringing back Quinn Ewers, really looking to make another playoff push, and not only make a playoff push now with the 12-team format, but getting a couple wins, and sneaky could make the national title. They make a lot of moves in the transfer portal, bring in another great recruiting class. They're developing some guys. And I think the fact that Quinn Ewers is coming back and you're not just throwing Arch Manning into the fire, this team's going to be really, really damn good. And when we're looking, let's talk about the big key pieces on this schedule. Michigan is the one that kind of stands out. They're the national title defending champs, but they don't have Harbaugh. They don't have JJ. They don't have Blake Corum. They won't have Roman Wilson. The defense is going to be really good. It's in Ann Arbor. And I think that is the big test to see how legit is the Sharon Moore team. Alex Orji is looking to be the quarterback. You're still going to have the Donovan Edwards. You still have a lot of good pieces on this team. They lose a lot of this staff. I think Michigan, the fact that this is at home makes it really interesting. Texas going in, it's earlier in the season, so we're not dealing with the cold temperatures that the Longhorns are not going to be used to. I'm circling this game as one of the most interesting games because you don't know what Sharon Moore as a head coach is. You say you do because of the interim, but you don't really know what Sharon Moore is because no one does. And I think if he was able to pull off a win in week 2, the impact that would have and the momentum they would be able to have for the rest of the season would be massive. Same could be said for Sarkisian in Texas. They go then and play UTSA, have a couple easier games. I don't think Mississippi State is truly a big threat. We go into the back half of the year. You get the bye week before Red River. Massive that they get that. They're going to want to get their lick back against Oklahoma. I'm curious on the development of Texas and their defensive line. They're losing some key pieces, Byron Murphy, and the reason why I point that out is Oklahoma. Their big red flag right now is the offensive line. Is Jackson Arnold going to be good enough to be able to dominate this Texas defense? That's another area of concern. This game is always going to be circled for both teams, and it's always going to be circled as a question mark. You never want to itch this as a win for either side. So that's another shaky game. We're talking Michigan, Oklahoma, and then you have Georgia the following week going into Austin. Talk about a very tough back-to-back for them to either come out 2-0 or 1-1. I think the prediction is they go 1-1, and that would be under the understanding. That would be if they go 1-1, that's their one loss if they're at 10.5 wins. Now, I don't know if they count the SEC title in these, so apologies, but if they go 10-1 or 10-2 or 11-1, if they were to go 11-1, they would have to beat 3 of the 4 of at A&M, which people may scoff at, but it's a rivalry game that has been in the making for now 10 plus years. Plus it's at A&M. Georgia coming in, the Red River game, and then Michigan. Now, A&M and Michigan both have big question marks just based off of new coaching staffs coming in. Georgia is going to be difficult. And that could be a matchup that we see again in the SEC title if they end up going 3-1. The rest of the schedule, I'm not too worried about. Kentucky doesn't really worry me. At Arkansas, if Arkansas wasn't just a dumpster fire, and obviously that's a rivalry game, but I don't think Arkansas is really going to be a threat this year. And then Florida would be interesting if it was in the swamp, but it's not. I think this is a really favorable schedule for Texas, but I do see a world where 10-2 is something I would lean in, just because those 4 games to go 3-1 would be really, really difficult for them to be able to pull off. Not to mention, you have to be able to beat everyone else in the SEC. I think Texas is going to be really damn good, but I can't just confidently say I would say they win 11 games this year. The Alabama Crimson Tide. Another team that I'm going to dive into their schedule. Actually, no. Alabama, I'm going to say I don't want to make the move here. I don't want, by the way, this is not me giving any kind of advice. These are just predictions. It's too early for me to say what Alabama is. You just lose your offensive coordinator. I don't know what to expect. Ben Grubb goes to Seattle, which, by the way, as a Seahawks fan, I love. I don't know what to expect with Alabama. I don't have enough knowledge on what that roster is going to look like. I expect them to get into the spring transfer portal window a lot harder. I would lean under. I just don't know what to expect with Mr. Milroe. So let's keep it pushing. Alabama at 9.5 seems like just the right enough line where I don't feel confident with them hitting a 10-win season, especially in the SEC. I would lean under just because there's so much uncertainty. Do I think that this team could actually be really good the following year? Of course, once they get their guys in. But you don't just lose Nick Saban and then produce another 10-win season. I just don't see that happening. And by every means, would it be a really entertaining story to see Jalen Milroe fulfill his potential? Like, he could be the best quarterback in the NFL draft next year. Yeah, but do I see it happening? I am not 100% sure. LSU at 9.5. I mean, just think about it, guys. We are like, as we're going into this, the amount of teams that have these massive high win totals. With LSU, I think they go under 9.5. We're looking at a team that does not have they do not have an easy non-conference schedule. I believe they start in Vegas against USC. And for what it's worth, like, you may scoff at that and be, oh, it's USC. They don't have Caleb Williams. And I hear you on that. Don't get that twisted. But they also had one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. Or not in the National Football League, in college football. They have a lot of talent. This team has always had a lot of talent. I just don't know if that defense is going to be good enough. They do bring in some great staffing that was fixing, hopefully, what was missing from the previous team. But you also go to Garrett Nussmeier, who's unproven. You lose Neighbors and Brian Thomas. There's a lot of things shifting that a 10-win season would be really difficult for LSU. Is it safe to say that one of LSU or Alabama hits 10 wins? Yeah, I could see that very easily. But I also could see a world where neither of them hit it. There's just a lot of questions. And by the way, like, we'll get a lot more refined questions and answers once we get a better understanding of what these teams are, especially after the spring transfer window. But as we are in February, I'm not liking 9.5 for either of those teams. Missouri's really interesting. Missouri loses a lot on their staffing. They bring back a lot, but they also lose Schrader, their running back. They're recruiting incredibly well. They're also having a great transfer window. I think also this is a team that I want to bring up their schedule because Missouri could be – I think Missouri is the biggest boomer bust team in the nation, or really at the SEC level. This is a sneaky team that could be in Atlanta. This is a sneaky playoff team. And it may not even be that sneaky as they're at a 9.5 window. If they hit 10 wins, they probably make the 12-team playoff. And that's not understating. Like, they would get an at-large bid. And 2024 looks very favorable for them. They should be going into Kyle Field off of a bye week. They will be going into their toughest matchup of the year in October, 4-0. They get the early bye. They play one of the worst collegiate teams in UMass, unless you're playing NCAA 25. Auburn is sneaky scary because it's Auburn. You never know. But at the same time, you have them at home. Bryant-Denny, Alabama is pretty tough. You never want to just sketch that as a win, but we don't know what Alabama is, and you'll have a good idea of what they are by then. Oklahoma at home. At South Carolina, you don't like playing, but it's not in Cocktober. At Mississippi State, and then Arkansas. This is, I think, the easiest 10-win team. But you sit there and you go, why isn't it not 10.5? Because Bryant-Denny, Kyle Field are not easy places to play, and then Oklahoma. Those are the ones that you circle. But you also have to replace a lot on the defensive coaching staff. You have to develop that defense a lot more. And Luther Burden's going to be a problem. But they also got to replace Schrader, who was the engine of that offense in the second half, and Brady Cook has to step up. I'm not sure, is Brady Cook still going to be the quarterback? I can't just remember off the top of my head, but look at that schedule. It's very favorable for Missouri to be a sneaky playoff team. It would not shock me. And let's keep it pushing. I know I've looked through each of these relatively quickly. Ole Miss, I'm going to slam the over. I think Ole Miss is comfortably going over this. They have one of the easiest schedules in the SEC. Non-conference is non-existent, and their conference schedule is very favorable for them. And I think 10 wins would be pretty easy. It would not shock me if Ole Miss and Missouri had 10-win seasons and LSU and Alabama did not. That's how crazy this 2024 season could get. Tennessee with Nico, I don't really want to comment on what Nico could be. I don't know. He's super, super talented. Non-conference doesn't really exist for Tennessee, but their conference schedule could be rough. I think 8-4, 9-3 could be viable, but I don't know what to expect with them. So I don't have any strong opinions. I will by springtime. A&M, it's my favorite team. I'm pulling up their schedule because this is the one that I have more knowledge than any other team in the SEC. And I want to talk about this team. This schedule's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time. Texas A&M in 2024 is going to be a brand new team. No Jimbo Fisher, one of the best transfer classes, yet they did lose some key pieces. Guys like Walter Nolan and Evan Stewart are not with the football program anymore. One went to Ole Miss, one went to Oregon. But this is a very interesting schedule for an 8-5 projected team. It's a difficult one. I'll be honest. I mean, starting the year off with Notre Dame is not an easy task. You do get them at home. Riley Leonard ends up playing his former coach in Mike Elko, which I think is a underrated first game of the year. I don't think A&M will be ranked, and if they were, it would be number 25. So I can't really classify this as a ranked matchup, but I think first game of the season, there's going to be some real juice with the program now that Jimbo Fisher has left. You go to McNeese, that's a tune-up game. At Florida, nothing's easy about playing in the swamp of Florida. We'll talk about their schedule here in a couple minutes because that's the one I want to highlight as one of the most gruesome schedules I've ever seen. But you should be able to handle things in Florida. Arkansas, I'd already said that they're going to be a mess this year. I don't think Arkansas, they could be the worst team in the SEC, and that's with Florida having the schedule that they do. Missouri's not going to be easy. You get LSU a lot earlier in the year, but you get them at home. You have to play at South Carolina, which you lost last time, at Mississippi State, something that A&M has struggled with. At Auburn's not fun, but you do get Texas at home. I would slam the under at 8.5 just because the schedule is brutal. I mean, for 8 wins, you would have to, or for 9 wins, you would have to have 3 losses out of Notre Dame, LSU, Missouri, Texas, and then I'm going to classify one of Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Florida. That's 5 potential losses, if not potentially. Yeah, that's 5. Because one of those 3, like A&M in previous years with Jimbo Fisher, had struggled to get those jobs done. And you could even classify to 6 potential losses. You would have to probably win half of those, if not more. Yeah, you would have to win at least half of them to get to 9 wins. And I think in the first year of the Mike Elko era, the real cherry on top is if you could live with going 8-4. You would love 9-3, obviously, if not better. But you could live with 8-4 if you beat Texas. That would be a huge deal for the new head coach coming in, is that you beat Texas. What the? All right. I'm going to just, because we're running low on time, let's talk about Florida's schedule. I don't know why it took me to Florida Gators Online. I mean, we're talking just brutal. Florida. This is the whole schedule. It is no surprise to anyone that Florida has a really tough schedule. Is this the toughest schedule in college history? We could do the hindsight game, but I think going into a season, this is up there. This is the new college football world that we live in. When you add Oklahoma and Texas to an already juiced non-conference schedule, like their total is 5.5, and if they get to 6, it would be remarkable if they get past. Like Miami is a potential loss, A&M is a potential loss. They should get the job done with at Mississippi State. So I'm going to try to be nice and give them that. UCF, that's their Super Bowl. Now you get them at home, but UCF is treating that as their Super Bowl. Also, shout out, I'm gonna give this shout out because I know who's watching the show right now. John Rice Plumlee, I believe, is going to be playing. I could be wrong. No, it's going to be KJ Jefferson. But shout out John Rice Plumlee. He respects coin. At Tennessee. Kentucky boat raced you last time. You're in the swamp, so I might let you live. But you get Georgia. That's not at home. You get at Texas. LSU, even if that's at home, LSU. Ole Miss at home. At Florida State. And you might not be favored against Kentucky. And you might not be favored against Mississippi State. That's 9 games on your schedule that you're very comfortable with potentially losing. And you're like 5.5. Like, if they go 6-6 in this, they like. Let me be clear. Samford, Mississippi State, Kentucky, I guess like A&M, Miami. That's 5 wins. Where's the next win at? Like their best, like the best 6-6 road is Miami, Samford, A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, Kentucky. And a good chunk of those they could lose. So if you lose one of those 6 games that I just listed, because I don't think you beat Tennessee at Tennessee. I don't think you beat Georgia. I don't think you beat Texas. I don't think you beat LSU. I don't think you beat Ole Miss. I don't think you beat Florida State. So you can't lose one of those 6 games or you are going below 500. And some may argue a lot of those games, they would comfortably take the other team. But I'm trying to help them out. Florida's in a tough position, man. They just brought in a class that kind of crumbled towards the end. DJ Lagway, as talented as he may be, I don't think he's ready year one. And is the staff or is the organization that is Florida willing to wait one more year past this? Are they willing to give Billy Napier one more year? What are you expecting from him with the schedule? I get it. You're Florida. You're you expect better. But with the crumble or like the remnants of what they have left from the previous staffing, it was going to take a while, and it's going to take longer. I know a lot of people are off on Billy Napier. A lot of people were off on the Florida State head coach, and he was able to turn around. But this is not what you turn around. Tim Tebow ain't getting back on the horse. Percy Harvin's smoking too much. It's going to get rough for Florida, and there's just things that they got to get fixed that I don't think get fixed in 365 days, and they would be. I would be shocked if they got to 6 wins, because the only road I see is Miami, Samford, A&M, Mississippi State, which, by the way, they would have to start 4-0 on the year. 4-0, beat UCF 5-0. They would have to start the year 6-1. 6-1. Because that back half of the schedule, I do not see them winning a single game. God, pray for your Gator fans, because it's not looking pretty. All right, that's enough about schedules and things like that. We're at time. I'm exhausted. I got a long day to go. That's all right. It's fine. Gators do not have aura. A&M has aura. But yeah, let's talk about real topics. Womp womp. You want to talk about the sophomore slump he's about to have? We can talk about the sophomore slump, which, by the way, I will say, since you want to mention this, Spencer, please don't bet on the All-Star game. Like, this is just a PSA to everyone. Don't bet on the All-Star game. I saw lines for that, bro. You can wait until the NBA comes back. You can wait. Everyone can wait for the NBA to come back. You can't be CJ Stroud's not going to cook. He's going to go under. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching Rush the Field today. See you guys next week. Email down below. Drop some of your favorite questions, and I'll read them out next week or until we get an email. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, y'all. Woo!